I'm Sonya Morton-Firth, and you're tuned in to the Sonya Morton-Firth Show. Today, my guest is Simon Alexander Ong, personal development entrepreneur, author, coach, and public speaker. In this episode, you will learn who you are with these thought-provoking questions.
When you start to refocus your energy and time on the things that matter most, then guess what? Life becomes magical.
What happens in the silence?
It is good to spend some time in silence, because what you come to appreciate is that silence is far from empty. It is full of the answers that you seek.
How to improve your energy immediately.
And this exercise, if you do this properly, it will immediately raise your level of energy.
Simon, welcome to my show. Should I just say for the second time? Because people that are listening, I recorded a fantastic episode with Simon over 2 years ago. We were just trying to decide how long ago it was. It was in lockdown. But Simon, welcome for the second time. It's great to have you on.
Sonia, thank you so much for having me on again.
Fantastic. Now, Simon, what I like to ask my guests at the beginning is for people tuning in, what will they get from listening to this conversation? What takeaways do you think they'll walk away with?
In short, by listening to this conversation, I hope that you will get insights, ideas, and lessons to energize your life so you can begin living a different story.
I love it. And Simon, let's start a little bit with your story, because I know your story, but for the benefit of those who don't, if you could give us a brief background of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So my career started in the world of financial services. I graduated from university. I had this mistaken belief that I had to pursue a job that was well respected, paid well, and fitted into one of the sectors of banking, law, medicine, or accounting. So I started my career there at the worst possible time in the middle of 2007, which was shortly before the financial crisis swept across the planet. And I ended up working for a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration shortly after I joined. And I ended up being in and out of employment for nearly 10 years. But I look back with fondness to that moment, because even though it was challenging and it was a dark period I went through, in hindsight, it was a beautiful blessing in disguise, because it was a catalyst that began to open my eyes to what else was out there beyond the bubble of finance. So I started exploring and researching the world of entrepreneurship and business and what it would be like to work for myself. And after trying a few things, I ended up landing back on the idea that I wanted to do something that helped other people, because I was always that person that people would come to, from family members to friends to acquaintances, when they had a problem or challenge that they were facing in their life or their career. But I never realized that I could monetize that. So I began focusing on building a coaching practice. And when I first left employment to start this business, I said to myself, if I could turn this into a thriving practice, I would be happy and fulfilled. But when you start to embark on the journey where it just makes you feel alive doing the work that you do, lots of other avenues begin to open up. And so even though I started off doing one-to-one coaching, I very quickly ended up speaking on stages at companies and conferences, to doing interviews on media channels like the BBC and Sky News. And in 2020, when the world went into lockdown, I was fortunate to get a book deal with Penguin to write my first book, Energize, which, since the last time we spoke, Sonia, has now been published. And it has been incredible to see it go out in the world and people taking photos and videos of their experience reading it. And the icing on the cake, looking back, was really getting the likes of Simon Sinek, Marie Forleo, Ali Abdaal, and other luminaries in my field endorsing and supporting the book.
Wow, Simon, that is a fantastic journey. And look, before we go on, because I really want to go down into the book and talk about Energize. But I have to say, I've known many coaches. I'm an accredited coach myself. And it's very easy, I think, for people to sit and listen and say, oh, another coach.
Yeah.
But you are a different coach. There is something very, very special about you, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but you
Mm,
have such a presence, um, that I believe this was something that you're here for.
mm.
Did you know that was a calling? Did you know that this was something within you?
It probably took me a while to believe it myself, because when you come from employment and you go into entrepreneurship, you have no idea what lies ahead. And because nobody in my immediate family had run a business themselves, they'd all worked for someone. So it wasn't like I had a reference point to base my journey on. I was going into this blind. But I think once I started speaking on stages and I got feedback from people saying, can I refer you to my friend? I think you should speak at his company, or I think you need to be speaking at this conference. So I really enjoyed that talk. And how can I follow you or learn more about your work? Once I started to get that sort of feedback, that made me realize that actually maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something in what I'm sharing and how I'm sharing it that is resonating with the people in the audience. And so I really started to focus more in these areas and go learning on how I could take this to a far bigger audience. And through that process, I really started to get my training in business. I never went to a formal business school to get a business qualification. All of this that I'm learning has been through experience. And if there's anything I've noticed when it comes to business, is that whether you're a coach or you have a different product or service, being passionate about that is only 50% of the game. The other half of the game is enjoying the business development side of it. Because if you only enjoy your product or service being great, you've got a hobby. But until you can really enjoy the business side of it, whether it's the marketing, the sales, the distribution, the content, then you're not really going to have a successful and thriving business.
Wow, Simon, that is so true. And do you enjoy all sides of it? Because it really is that you could have somebody with a lot of knowledge, a very good coach. We're
Mm,
using coaching here as an example, but you could use it in other business as well. But like you say, it doesn't make them the top of their game. There's a huge
mm.
secret sauce missing.
It's if I had to boil it down to one word, Sonia, it would be communication. Because you can have the best product or service. And of course, you need to believe that first. If you don't believe that, how is anybody else going to believe it? But there's no point in having a great product or service if you don't know how to communicate that to other people. If you don't know how to communicate your value to other people, if you don't know how to communicate your story to other people, then how are they going to realize that that is something they need? And so the ability to communicate what you can offer to other people, and that covers a broad spectrum from offline events, speaking to an audience, to online through your social media, through podcasts, through your videos. All of this is a form of communication, even your writing, your articles. All of this is communication. But what and how are you communicating to the audience will determine whether they want to follow you and whether they want to do business with you.
Simon, taking a step back, sort of looking at the bigger picture, what is your mission?
My mission is probably a couple of things. The first is to show people that taking steps to work towards your dreams is something you should do and that it can work. Because I think through my story of having been in employment, I wasn't born into entrepreneurship. I didn't have a wealthy family that said, whatever you decide to do, Simon, we'll back you. And there's an infinite number of funds that are behind you. So if you fail, hey, we can always buy you out. I never had that. My parents were very poor. They were immigrants to the country here in the UK, and they had to work hard to support two children. And for me to go from that to getting into college, to get a good degree, and then working in a company to understand how it is like working in a company, to quitting that and having to jump into the uncertainty of the unknown to create what I've created today. The first thing is to show people it is possible. It can be done. That's the first part of the legacy I'm looking to create. The second part of my mission is to really awaken people's imagination to what is possible so they can write a better story. Because so many people in today's world are exhausted, not because they're doing too much, but because firstly, they are running someone else's race and living up to their definition of success. And secondly, they are doing too little of the things that bring them joy and make them feel alive. So I want to show them that actually, when you start to refocus your energy and time on the things that matter most, then guess what? Life becomes magical. Life becomes fulfilling. And life becomes something you look forward to every single day, not just on the weekends and your holidays. It becomes something that you wake up to excited to see what is possible, what you can paint, what you can create, what you can manifest. And the third is to show my right now child, but hopefully children, to show my children uh, of the fact that when you focus on what makes you unique, that is how you're going to stand out in the world. That is not about fitting in. You know, when we're young children, we all want to fit in. We all want to say that I want to be like him or her. But I want to show them that actually by just being who you are, by being you and focusing on what makes you different, that is how you're going to stand out and create whatever you want to create.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful because you're absolutely right. We are all unique.
Mm,
And I think certainly for my era, we've been sort of quite programmed
mm,
to believe in what, and you mentioned it there, what is success, you know,
yeah.
what we should be doing with our lives, you know, a typical, you know, school, university, lawyer, finance. I had a very similar sort of journey to yourself
Mm,
in the finance industry, but it could have been a lawyer, a doctor, or something that society or your
mm,
parents tell you is successful. And it took me actually up until literally a couple of years ago
mm.
to redefine success. What does success mean to you, Simon?
Success to me simply means number one, being better than who I was yesterday, constantly. Because if you're always looking to be better than who you were yesterday, you're going to be able to adapt to whatever the world throws your way because you are embracing that eternal student mindset. And second, success for me is doing the things you love and choosing how you spend your time. That to me is the ultimate success. Success is less about how much money or what your balance is in your bank account. It's more about what your calendar looks like. Because if you have the freedom to choose how you spend your time and who you spend it with, that to me is the ultimate wealth. It's the ultimate wealth because then you have the freedom to design your lifestyle.
Completely. And yet we are so well conditioned to believe it's your salary that comes in every month,
Mm,
how many zeros you've got on the end of it, what's the latest car in the driveway, how big your house is, what the latest watch is, this, that, the other. It's such a condition, I think, and
mm,
hopefully, I think as our generations as are growing, we are. I see a shift. I think there is a shift in society, certainly from my generation. But look, I would love to talk about your book,
mm,
Energize. But I think the first thing that springs to mind, I'm sure you've been asked this before, is what is energy? I mean, you know, when I think of energy, I think of one thing. I actually looked it up in the dictionary, and I
mhm,
don't know if you did this, but it comes up with so many different definitions of energy.
mm,
Everything from physical activity to work, to the quantum field.
mm.
What is energy, Simon?
Sure. So energy, in its simplest meaning, I guess, is life force. Energy is life force. So, you know, we can all relate to this. Some mornings you wake up and you have the energy to get out of bed and get lots of things done. And some days you just don't have the energy to get up at all. So energy in a way is a life force. And it's something that's been known for centuries in humanity. If you look at popular culture, it's talked about so much. You know, Star Wars, they call it the Force. In Maori culture, they call it mana. In my culture, they call it chi.
Gee,
And if you study yoga, they call it prana. Now we know about this in popular culture, but we don't really look to practically address it in our own selves. Now, energy, the way I see it, Sonya, is split into four dimensions. There's physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. Now, often when we think about addressing our energy, which a lot of people do at the beginning of every new year, we tend to exclusively focus on physical energy. So that is things such as get more rest, or sign up to a new gym, or get fitter, or change up my diet. Get better nutrition to my body. This is what we call physical energy. These are the things that we can see and we can feel when it affects our health. But if we neglect the other areas, what happens is we don't have a holistic approach to energy management. So, mental energy is about your mindset, it's your ability to focus and access your creative energy. Emotional energy is how you relate to yourself and others. Now, you can also call this emotional resilience or emotional intelligence. And then the final one, spiritual energy, is about doing the things that make you feel alive, to give yourself meaning. So when you are low on spiritual energy, it means that the work you are doing is not aligned to your values, and it does not allow you to express your potential. So the way that manifests is in the form of tension in your stomach. So you might feel that on a Monday morning when you go into the office, but it's a job you hate. So you have this tension in your stomach because it is the body telling you you're not meant to be doing this sort of work. When you are high on spiritual energy, then what happens is that you're in flow. Things feel lighter and you find you get more done in days and weeks than most do in months or years. That's what it means to be high on spiritual energy. So when we bring these things together, then what happens is that we're living a more energized life.
I love that. That is the four different areas. I love that explanation. I don't think I've heard that the mix explained like that before. But how do you create that? Because it's like a coming together of all these
Mm,
different energies. I mean, the first one you said, physical energy, like you
mm.
said, we're actually talking in January. People have probably just done their goals. They're probably hitting the gym. I mean, I'm a regular gym goer, so I
Mm.
hate January because I can never get to where I want to get to. By February, it's empty again.
Yeah.
But people, you see people write their goals, and I've helped people with this before, and I've said, but again, we're back to, are these really your goals, your
Mm.
dreams, your standards, or are they somebody else's? Because if they're somebody else's, you're not going to stick to them.
Absolutely. And this is why what I notice when people talk about resolutions is that often they're making the same resolution that they made the previous year. And in many cases, again, the previous year and the previous year and the previous year before that. So it's a repetition of the same resolution that hasn't been actually resolved, but they're bringing it back again to try again for another year. So when I work with my clients or I speak to audiences about goal setting, I say what you actually want to do before you set the goal is to understand what your vision is. And a vision is somewhat different to a goal. So a goal is measurable. So a goal might be something like, I want to go to the gym 3 days a week. So the goal is either you have or you haven't. You can measure it, you can tick it off. But a vision is different because a vision taps into something more visceral, which is your emotion. So a vision is something you may or may not even get close to manifesting, but it's something that drives you forward. So it could be a vision you have for a better world in your version of what that looks like. And what you do is once you have that vision, you work backwards and the goals present themselves. You then know which are the areas you have to work on in order to make that vision a reality. And there's one exercise I get a lot of my clients to do, which is to think about a magazine that you would be proud to be featured in. So in my case, it could be anything from Forbes to Entrepreneur Magazine to Harvard Business Review to Inc. Magazine, some of these big publications within the world of entrepreneurship and business. What you then want to do is imagine that a article has just been written about your life as if you are now 75 years old. And this article is talking about what you have already accomplished or the legacy that you have created to live the life that you lead today. And what you want to do is write this down in as much detail as you can. So you are the editor of this article. So you're writing down exactly what you would love to read. And you're writing down again as if it has happened or it is happening now. So I am living a life where I'm doing this, I'm spending time with these people, I have built this in my business, I'm impacting these many lives. Because the clearer you are about what that vision is, the easier it is to know what the goals are to help make that happen. And to summarize that up, if you're taking notes on this, the way I condense and distill this is into this statement: visualize in years, plan in months, execute in days. The visualize in years is where the vision piece comes in. The plan in months is where the goals come in. And then the execute in days is where the action piece comes in. If you're not executing, how's the plan going to be realized? If the plan isn't realized, how's the vision going to manifest? These things don't just work on their own. You have to have a bias to action.
Wow, I mean, I've got goosebumps thinking about that. I've got a bit more of a macabre way of doing it. I remember once, I think it was last year, I decided to write my obituary.
Mm.
What do you want people to say about you?
Mm.
But I think that may go to more the emotional side and how
Mm.
you want to show up in the world. But yeah, I love the magazine. I'm going to do that.
Mm.
Absolutely do that. That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. And sometimes though, having the big vision can be frightening. When I've spoken to people that they say about how am I going to get there? Uh,
Mm.
how do you answer people? I mean, I always encourage people to think big. This is why we're here. Too many times we're
Absolutely.
actually thought to we're put in these tiny little boxes, and I always say, well, no, break out the box. That's somebody else's box, and think big, think wide. But I think we're constrained about the how. How do you tackle that if somebody would say, well, how do I actually get there?
Well, first of all, being in a mindset of thinking how is actually good. Because what that tells me is that you've gone from interest to commitment. So with a lot of goals and visions, most people are just interested. If it happens, great, but if it doesn't, I can always try again next year. So that's what I call interest. You haven't actually made a decision. You're 50-50. You kind of want it, but you're not really sure you want it. But the moment you're committed, which means this will happen, I want this to happen, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to see this come to reality, that's when you're jumping to the land of how. Great. So how am I going to do this? How am I going to make the steps required to get from here to there? And for me, that's great because now your mind has to go out and learn. So the next step to make this happen is to redesign your environment. Redesign your environment so that it is one that makes success inevitable. So you want to sit down and start looking at your current environment. So when I mean your environment, I mean, who are you spending the most time with? What are you watching on television or on social media? Who are you following? What are you reading? What podcasts are you following? Really do an audit of how you are spending your environment and what is in that environment. What are your inputs into your mind? And then say, if I am to be the person that is going to create that vision and accomplish all of those goals, who must I become to make that a reality? And notice how you begin thinking about that shift in your environment. Great. If I'm already that person who is living that vision, who has already achieved those goals, then I would be reading these sort of books. I would be following these sort of people. I would be watching these shows. I would be going to these events. Notice how very subtly and quickly your environment changes. And that will give you the answer. I've got to do this. I've got to spend time with these people. Once your environment changes, your mind is open to a universe of possibilities.
And you must have come across people that maybe have those that maybe push back and say, "Well, Sam, I just don't have the time to do all that," or "I don't
Mm,
have the time." I work a busy job. I've got
mm,
children, or whatever it may be. I've got these various different other commitments of my life. I would love to do all of these. I'd love to have
mm.
the time to do that, but I just don't.
I love that question. I love when people say that to me, Sonia, because what I always say in response, and deep down they know this, what I always say in response is time is not the issue. You're telling me I don't have time for this. What you're actually telling me behind those words is that goal and vision right now is not a priority for me. That's what you're actually telling me. Because you and I know that if something was a priority, you would make time for it. Don't believe me? Well, remember the last time one of your friends recommended you this incredible Netflix show to check out? Did you find time to watch it? Or when somebody said, "Oh, we should do this weekend." And if that was an activity you really wanted to do, even though you already had other obligations, did you find time to do that activity? Yes. So what you're saying to me really is not that you don't have time, it's that this right now is not a priority. So the question I would ask you back is, what would make that goal and vision a priority for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess then you've just reframed the question,
Absolutely.
and turned the question around. One thing I loved about your book, is when as you're reading it, you give the reader various different exercises to do in
Mm.
the form of questions, and you're asking the question to the audience. The where I what I was particularly interested in is the part I call "Know Thyself,"
Mm.
because I'm a great believer in the first person you've got to really understand is yourself, because then you, without that knowledge, you can't know what your purpose is, your
Mm.
passion is, where you should be, where you derive your energy from. And could you walk me through some of the questions that you asked in your books? I thought they were so interesting, of getting people to really sort of delve deep within
Yeah.
themselves.
So,
Really
first
nice.
of all, questions are powerful, and questions is what coaching is all about. You know, if you've never experienced coaching before, coaching is all about questions because with the right question, it's like having the right key to open the door to where you want to be. Questions are the things that can help unlock the path forward. So, couple of questions I shared early in the book, which is all about really understanding yourself and your purpose, are the same questions that I asked myself when I was early in my journey, still working a day job in finance, but really yearning for something bigger. And the first question was, what does success mean to you? What does success mean to you? The second question after that is, what sort of impact do you want to have in the world? What sort of impact do you want to have in the world? And the third is, what do you need to change in your current setup to make it easier to achieve that vision? Because when we talk about changes, what we're really talking about is habits. You know, if you were to take your average day right now and repeat it every day for the next 5 years, would you be closer to or further away from where you want to be? Now, if the answer is the latter, further away from where you want to be, then the question is, what has to change today so that tomorrow you'll get closer to where you want to be? And then the challenge for you is to then put that into action. And so when people say to me, because another challenge I notice when I speak to people is this idea of being ready. When people say to me, yes, but I don't feel ready yet, you know, I still got these obligations or I still got to make an income. What I say to them, just to get them thinking a little bit, is how much longer will you avoid doing what you are capable of in order to continue with what you are comfortable doing? And just let that sit with them.
Mm.
Because we tend to think that we have forever, but we don't. You know, too many of us live as if we're never going to die and then die having never really lived. So, what we forget is that the most powerful moment that is in our control is now, is right now. Tomorrow is not going to be any different unless you change something that you are doing today.
It actually sometimes scares me how little time we have, and I'm a
Mm.
great believer, and I am going to be living till 120. Absolutely going there. And I turned 50, which was a big milestone a couple of years back.
Mm.
And I already feel like, oh my God, I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time. So yes, but I completely understand. It's like, oh, I'll put that off till tomorrow. I'll put that
Yeah.
off till tomorrow. And that's the one thing I would have said to my younger self, don't put off. Don't put it
Mm.
off. Now you will never be ready. There will never be the most amazing time to do anything.
Indeed. It's about embracing the unknown because otherwise, tomorrow becomes never. Tomorrow becomes never. But if you do it now, what happens is that at least you can start building your experience, you can start building momentum. And nothing gives you better clarity than action. Because when you put yourself out there, when you share your work, when you try something new, what happens is life becomes the best teacher. It shows you what works and what doesn't work, and you can adapt and refine. But you can't do that just playing scenarios in your head because that isn't reality. That's just theory. Theory only takes you so far. You've got to put that into action.
And sometimes it's the failing or what
Mm.
think about that word in whatever way, but sometimes it's finding that you are coming across obstacles that help you learn even more and you go forth.
Yeah. I mean, finding that peace with the fact that you are going to have obstacles and that failure is part of the journey, if you can find peace with that, you become unstoppable. You become unstoppable because we're all going to have some level of failure and setbacks, regardless of what stage of the journey you are. I still have many setbacks and failures right now. And I know mentors of mine who are even further ahead than me, they have their own setbacks and failures. Now, what you come to realize when you embark on this journey of self development is that these things actually don't matter much. What matters more is how you choose to respond to them, because in your response lies your greatest power.
Absolutely. And that is so important. And quite often I have to nip myself in the bud and go, no, this is a test. How are you? In fact, I had one this weekend where I was going towards something and I didn't get it, and I was disappointed, but I couldn't let it get to me. Obviously, you
Mhm.
have that brief moment of that I've worked for this and it hasn't happened, but you've got to sort of pick yourself back up and dust yourself off and go, oh, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I do better? What is it that it's telling me? Maybe this is slightly the wrong direction. Maybe actually this is the universe's way of saying this one wasn't for you, but it's the next one.
Absolutely, and the visual of that scene in the Rocky film comes to my mind, Sonia, when Sylvester Stallone says to his son in the street after they've had an argument, where he says to him, "It's not about how hard you can hit; it's about how hard you can get hit and keep getting up again and again and again." And that is what life is all about.
I am laughing so hard because about an hour ago I said to somebody that very quote, literally an hour before we got onto this
Great
podcast.
minds, huh,
One
Sonia?
of my favorite quotes, one of my favorites. So going back to the energy, so we're going through life on our journey, and I think part of the thing we all want is that energy.
Mm.
How can we really improve or enhance or ignite the energy that we need to get us through this journey?
Sure. So I start the book around physical energy for a reason. So the very first chapter of my book is about physical energy, and it's there because without your health, you can't do anything. We saw this during the pandemic years that if you are healthy, you may have lots of hopes, dreams, and goals, but if you are sick, you only have one. That's just to be healthy again. So your physical energy has to be the bedrock and the foundation for everything that you do. You mentioned just now, Sonia, that you want to live to 120. I'm of the same. I'm of the same belief as you. That's what I'm aiming for, and that's why this is important if you want to have the energy to get things done. Because there's no point living longer if your health is suffering. There's two words that are talked about in the longevity space. You have lifespan and you have health span. Lifespan is your biological age, is how long you expect to live. So your lifespan might be 0 to 120. But if your health span means that you only are in good health until you are 70, does that mean for the next 40, 50 years, you're going to be in very poor health, suffering because you haven't addressed your health span? So for me, physical energy is the first place to start. If you have good sleep and rest, if you're feeding your body right, if you're moving your body on a regular basis, think about how much of a different mental state you're going to be in to tackle whatever the day throws your way. You're going to respond in a far healthier way than if none of those things were in place. So that's what I would address at the get-go is look at your physical energy, score yourself from 0 to 10. And if it's 5 or below, ask yourself, what must I do to move that upper level? Work on that. And then you want to start thinking about the other areas. So spiritual energy is about, well, what is the work you're doing? And are you doing the things that make you feel alive? As simple as that. Mental energy is, well, how am I managing my attention? Because we live in a world where there is increasing demands on our attention, from the pings on your phone to phone calls to somebody asking you to do lots of different things or get involved in these projects. So your ability to manage your focus is going to be critical in a world that is only getting busier.
Have you got any sort of action steps somebody can take to manage their focus?
Yeah. So one of the best tips I can give you is think about the lifestyle you want to lead first and then build everything else around it. So one of my friends, for example, he says to himself, he has 5 children, so it's critical that he has time blocked out to spend time with the family. So what he does is he has weekends and Wednesdays blocked for the family. Thursdays and Fridays, where he has meetings or where he has, uh, podcast recordings, and where he goes out and does his work. Mondays and Tuesdays are what he calls content creation. That's where he's recording content, writing content, and distributing content or scheduling content. But because he's already built that lifestyle, he's blocked that time out, he's put boundaries in place. What happens is that he's protected his energy for what matters most. And if you can't make one of those Thursdays or Fridays in a given month, then you have to block it out in the next month. So now he can communicate how he operates. Other people understand and they work around it.
I don't want to take you off on a tangent, but you just said the words protecting your energy, which I
Mm,
think is another a great topic around this, because it's one thing to have the energy
yeah.
and to feel like, oh my gosh, this is my journey, this is my path,
Mm,
this is what I feel excited and energized about. But sometimes you can have that buffed about a bit if you
mm.
don't protect it. Can you talk around that and how we can actually protect our energy?
Yeah, it's so key. I mean, if you don't protect the energy, you're going to get burnt out. No matter what energy level you have, if you don't protect it, you're going to get burnt out because there is only so much you can give to others. And so this is where being clear on what is important and what your goals are feeds into this. Because if you're not clear on what your goals are or what you're working towards, you can end up saying yes to everything. You can say end up saying yes to every opportunity, but all that's going to do is lead to burnout. But once you're clear on what your goals are, what you're looking to achieve, then that informs which things you say yes and no to. And don't be afraid to say no. Sometimes we say, no because, and then the because becomes something they can use against you. So it could be no because I have a lot on this month, and then somebody might say, great, let's do it next month. And so you find yourself still in that cycle of saying yes to it, but you've just delayed it. So you want to be clear as to what do I say yes and no to. If it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no. Otherwise, what happens in reality is too many of us have hell maybes. There are things that I'm not so sure I want to do it, but I'm going to say yes for now. Then when it comes up, you're like, well, I said yes already, but I don't really like to do this. So you'd far rather spend the limited time we have doing the things that you actually want to do than the things you think you should do.
That's so true. There's another thing around that. I sometimes, it's sometimes about the potentially the people that you might be having that situation with, and
Yeah.
there's that sort of expression, energy drainers, and
Mm,
there are
mm,
people that if you surround yourself with some people that can actually drain your energy. Do you believe
yeah.
that's personal to them, or just personal to the dynamics that you have with that person?
Yeah, so the way I see it is, yes, you have drainers and then you have energizers. And ideally, you want to spend time with energizers, people that uplift you, that show you what is possible, and avoid spending too much of your time around drainers. Now, of course, that is not possible for every scenario because you may have drainers in your family, in your workplace, your boss may even be a drainer. So there'll be instances where you cannot control the effect of that energy. However, what you can do is you can dilute that impact. Because if you know ahead of time that this individual is a drainer, you can reflect on how you can dilute that impact on you before it infects yourself. So, just to give an example, if I know that somebody I'm catching up with because I have to catch up with them is a drainer, I might change some of the questions I use in my conversation just to make it a bit more interesting. So, if I know someone is a drainer, and usually I might say to them, "How has your week been?" Now, they may come back and say, Simon, my week's been terrible and this didn't happen and that didn't happen. And it just feels like nothing's going right at the moment. If I know that they're that sort of person, I might change my question to say something like, hey, it's been a while since we caught up. What has gone well for you in the time since we last spoke? Now, what I've subconsciously done is I've redirected their subconscious to something that is positive. So their answers may be somewhat different. They may say, hey, you know what? Since we last spoke, I caught up with my dad for the first time in a long while. And that was amazing. That was so beautiful because we went through quite a tough relationship, and it was quite nice to be able to catch up with him in person. So what we're doing here is we're just having a bit of fun with this.
Mm,
Where
mm.
we're seeing how can we dilute the impact of somebody who is normally a drainer, but in this instance, we have no choice because we have to spend time with them. How do we have a bit of fun in terms of changing that energy?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm going to try that out next time I meet a couple of people. So beware, beware. Also, in terms of the way we get our energy, is it true that people get their energy in different forms? I mean, there's this whole introvert, extrovert. The one thing I know about myself is
Mm,
I'm an extrovert. I have to be around people to get my energy. I love, don't get me wrong, I love being on my own as well. I like
mm,
my own time, my own space. But I really do crave sort of people and that energy. I
yeah.
find myself working better in, say, a coffee shop environment than sitting on my own. It's
Yeah, so some things that give us energy, Sonia, are universal. So it would be things such as doing exercise, getting sufficient sleep, spending time in nature, going for a swim. These things are universal, but there are also things that are more personalized. So, for example, when you want to recharge your batteries, you might find certain activities do that better than others. And so, really, it's about understanding what are the things that you do that give you energy, and what are the things that you do that take energy away, and how can you do more of the things that give you energy. So, if we look at a popular area in wellness that lots of people talk about, which is meditation, we know meditation is universally accepted as something that gives you energy, that calms your mind, that gives you greater focus. But how we execute on that might be different from person to person. So one person might be able to sit with no sounds, close their eyes, back straight, and they'll be perfect meditating for half an hour. For someone else, that might feel like torture. So for them, their version of meditation might be going for a long swim or going for a jog in the park near them without any distractions. So it's just about exploring within these areas what works best for you and how can you integrate them into your lifestyle. Because if the process, the habit, and the activity is fun, then it becomes easy to follow through with them.
absolutely, and I completely after I've been trying meditation for a long on and off for a long time. I'm quite excited because I'm going to do a bit of Joe Dispenza's
Mm,
work this year, which I am looking forward to. But
mm,
yes, to take myself onto a completely different plane, and actually coming to that in terms of you talked about spiritual energy,
mm,
and the one thing that I've been exploring is this whole energy and the field we
mm,
create.
mm,
And I think, people, or everyone, I think you can speak to, and you can talk about walking into a room and feeling the energy. I'm very much
mm.
of it, feeling that energetic energy and the sort of vibration levels we are
Yeah.
causing. What are your sort of thoughts around that in terms of energy and how we can maybe, I don't want to say the word awake, but I'm going to say the word awake or
Mm.
raise our consciousness levels.
Yeah, absolutely. We are living in an energetic field. I mean, energy is what exists in the blank space between us. If you don't believe that we emit energy, just check your smartwatch because our heart and our brain, we measure the energy emitted by them through ECG and EEG monitors. That's measuring actual frequencies. That's measuring the electricity and the energy that you're emitting through these organs. So we know that we are energetic beings. So in the example you shared, Sonia, about you walk into a room and you can feel someone's energy straight away. It's so true. Energy is this universal language in some way that you and I can understand, yet it has no words. So if I take another example, if you work in a company and your boss comes in late one morning, before he or she has said a single word, you know if he or she has had a bad night or not, just by the body language, just by the energy that they're emitting. So we do live in this energetic field. And if we want to raise our vibration, we've got to do the things that contribute to a higher energy. Are the things you're doing contributing to living at a high level of consciousness, or are they actually contributing to a lower level of consciousness? And what happens, which I think is beautiful, is that you notice the change in yourself and your field when you raise that vibration. Because when you raise your vibration, guess what? You attract different people. You walk into a room, suddenly the people you end up speaking with will be very different. I find myself spending time with people who are vastly different to the people I spent with at the beginning of my journey. And I think a lot of that is to do with my energy. When I connect with people, I'm going to repel some people and I'm going to attract other people. But the people I attract will be those who are playing the same game I am and vibrating at that same level.
Did you consciously raise your vibration, or was it something that naturally happened? And if it was something that naturally happened, sorry, a few bits to this question,
Mm.
what do you think you did, or what state of mind were you in?
I think a raised vibration is a byproduct of working on your energy. When you work on your energy, absolute guarantee, your vibration will increase. Your vibration will increase. I mean, you can tell the difference in conversation when you speak to somebody who loves what they do, who feels so privileged they get to do the work that they do, versus somebody who's only doing it to pay the bills. You can tell the difference. And that vibration, again, is just a natural consequence of someone working on their energy. If you're working on your energy every single day, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, guess what? You are going to be vibrating at a higher level of frequency. And not only will you feel that, but everyone who comes into your field will notice. They will say to you, I don't know what it is, but you just feel different in a good way. I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint it, but there's just something about you.
And it's in the
That
field.
is energy. That is frequency. That is vibration.
You also discussed the journey between the head and the heart.
Mm, mm,
Talk to me a little bit about that. I love this, the that journey, which is so
yeah.
important because we're all ruled by the mind.
The longest journey we make as humans is the inches from our head to our heart. And the reason it is the longest journey is because deep down, we all have an understanding of who we are at our core and what we truly want. You can call this intuition, innate wisdom, your inner compass. We all have it. We're born with it. That's why we're all different. I read something in a book called Mastery by Robert Greene, and he said that there will never be anyone like you, nor will there ever have been, because your genetic makeup, your DNA, your constructs of your strengths, your weaknesses, your preferences, your likes and your dislikes is completely bespoke to you. And that means that you have a unique signature, a unique energy signature inside of you. So the reason why it's the longest journey is because for many of us, for much of our lifetime, we suppress what it is trying to tell us. We suppress what the heart is trying to tell us. And we go off into the world seeking everything and anything outside of ourselves without realizing actually, by going inwards, we have all the wisdom and the insight we need. And the quieter we are, the more we can hear. And that is why I say to people, it is good to spend some time in silence, whether that is journaling or meditating or going on a retreat somewhere, because what you come to appreciate is that silence is far from empty. It is full of the answers that you seek. And when you spend time in silence, what you are actually doing is you are spending time in conversation with your soul. And when you have conversations with your soul, you're actually deepening that bond with your true self, allowing your true self to manifest in the external.
I'm a great believer in certainly that, and using your intuition, your
Mm,
heart rather than your head. I think a large part of my I'm going to say my career
mm,
up until I sort of changed my journey, it was my head that was in the way.
yeah.
It was the thoughts that were coming in constantly. I think we've got something like 60,000 thoughts I read somewhere
Mm.
the other day, and the majority of those can be negative. And it's almost quiet, trying to quiet those down and tap into your heart.
Mm,
And more recently, I've sort of tried to understand how do you know it's really coming from your heart? Because sometimes your head still gets in the way and says, no, 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 don't be stupid. It's still sort of there going, you can't do this. Where deep down you go,
Mm.
oh, but this feels like the calling, and the head's going, no, you're just nuts.
For me, I think you know when it's coming from your heart, when it is all to do with emotion, because anything emotion related is about your heart, is your feeling. Uh, and it's why sometimes if you ask married couples, so couples that have been married for a long time, how did you know it was the right time to get married? How did you know you wanted to get married? What they will often say is, I don't know. I can't pinpoint anything. It just felt right. It just felt she or he was the right person. It felt like we were destined to get married. But you can't logically explain it. You can't rationally explain it or put it into like, hey, he or she ticked these boxes, we hit these criteria, and then we were able to get married. It was, it just felt like the right time. That's what we call coming from heart. If you're coming from mind, the mind is logical. The mind needs explanations. The mind is where the ego lives, and so it's a very different place to operate from. And you can tell as well when you're in a room of people, when you're spending time with someone else, your heart is often the place that will say to you, "Hmm, something about this doesn't feel right." Again, we're going from emotion and feeling, doesn't feel right. Whereas the brain might say, "Well, I think we can make this work if it ticks these boxes and we get this profit from this deal." So this is where the brain comes in. So you know it's coming from your heart when it's all about feeling and emotion.
I sometimes get little pulses um, when I listen to somebody speak like that. You've said a lot
Mm,
of things in this conversation, and I've had little sort of like little bubbles resonating in my body. And I felt it before in conferences when I've listened to people on
mm,
stage, and whatever they've been saying, I've really resonated, and it's been literally a
mm,
sort of a physical reaction to their words, because it's speaking to my heart.
mm. It's
That's
what I think psychologists call emotional resonance.
yes.
So when something resonates with you emotionally, you have either a flashback or a connection that just goes, yes, I connect with this so deeply, and it creates that pulse. It creates that sort of like awareness. The body is telling you, actually, this is something I really connect to.
I connect to. Simon, I'm wary of the time, but I'd love to leave our listeners, our audience, your sort of real sort of last sort of three main, I guess, I wouldn't say energy hacks. That's not the right
Mm,
word. But if there were three things that you could say, okay, if you could adopt the areas to really boost your energy, or to maybe for you to look at your energy in a
mm.
little bit more depth, what would they be?
I'm going to give one exercise, but it has 3 steps. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give one answer, but it has 3 steps. So hopefully that fits in with the 3 tips. And this exercise, if you do this properly, it will immediately raise your level of energy. Guaranteed, it will immediately raise your level of energy, no matter what you are feeling in this instance. In fact, if you are going through a particularly tough period right now, personally or professionally, this will have the greatest impact on you. And it's 3 steps. The first is to write down the name of somebody that you can be grateful for. The first name that comes in your mind of somebody that you can be grateful for that has helped you to become who you are today. So it could be a loved one, it could be a family member, it could be a close friend, whoever it is, jot that name down. The second step is to write down in as much detail as you can. This part is important, why you chose that person. So you want to be specific. What did they do? How did they support you? How did they show up to support you? How did your life change because of him or her? So get into as much detail as you can. The third step, and this is where the magic happens, the third step is for you to find a quiet room, pick up the phone, call that person, and tell them exactly what you wrote down in step 2. Now, if that's a little uncomfortable, at a minimum, what you want to do is to send them a recorded voice note. And the key here is that they must be able to hear your voice, because your voice carries energy. And when they hear your voice, they can feel the emotion behind it. Whereas if you simply send a letter or a text or an email, they don't really know the emotion or the energy behind the words. Whereas when you speak it out into existence, they can feel that energy and they can feel that place of gratitude.
Wow, I love this. Simon, where can people get your book? I mean, I actually, funny enough, I downloaded your book from Audible, and you get to listen to your voice. So
Mm,
exactly what you've just saying. It was your voice. You know, the voice was very important, and I love
mm.
listening to things. But where can other people find out about your book?
Sure. So you can get it from Amazon or one of your local booksellers. But if you want to be certain, you can go to getenergizebook.com. That is energize with a Z. And from there, you can select your region and your retailer and purchase a copy of the book from there. And if you are interested, do sign up to my weekly newsletter at my website, simonalexanderong.com. Every week, I send 7 powerful insights and 3 inspiring quotes that have helped shape me recently.
And we'll put that link in the show notes. My final question to you, Simon, though, I could feel like we could go on for ages. Look, you've had a massive influence on thousands of people
Mm.
through your work, and the one, I guess, the one, what I'd like to know is what's the one impact you want to have on your daughter?
I guess the most important impact I would love to have on my daughter is that she grows up with the belief that she has value to offer the world. Because I think that if she grows up with that belief, then literally anything is possible.
Simon, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. It's been truly wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me on again, Sonia.